Me turn?
Go for
You
it.
turn.
Okay. What is your favorite national park?
Glacier. That I've been to.
Yeah,
Also Glacier.
I would say me as well. But almost tied, if not close second, is Yosemite.
Yosemite is also dope.
Yeah. I think as a group of friends, we travel to national parks quite often.
Yeah.
It's like, and living in Utah, there's 5 within a couple hours of us.
Yeah.
So it's like a big part of our life. I'm going to tell the story of a young kid named Dennis Martin. And Dennis was 6 years old in June 14th, 1969. Dennis, his older brother who was 9, his grandpa and his father, they go out to the Great Smoky National Park.
That one's dope too.
Have you been there?
Yeah.
Where is it at? And
So it's in Tennessee.
oh, okay.
Have you ever heard of Gatlinburg? It's in the Great Smoky Mountains.
Uh-uh.
It's like a popular tourist destination.
Huh. Okay. Well, you've been there.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going out to relax. Also, everything in this story I'm about to tell you is substantiated through affidavits, Freedom of Information Acts, like newspaper, investigate, like everything
It's real.
substantiated. So Dennis, his brother, his grandfather, and his dad go to a place in the national park called Spence Field. So think of like an open meadow with a tree line surrounding it. And the dad and grandpa are just sitting there watching their 2 boys play. They're chasing each other around. One will like scare the other and run away, but they can see him the entire time. Very clearly right in front of them. After a while, another family, it's just a father and a son. They show up and their son, or the son, starts playing with the 2 boys. So now it's 3 boys running in the field. And Mr. Martin like asks his name and he says their last name is Martin, which is kind of weird. So there's 3 Mr. Martins standing there watching 3 boys play. And he's watching his youngest son, Dennis, and he sees Dennis climb into a bush. And he had been doing that like all day because he'd been jumping out and scaring his brother. So he watches him climb into a bush and he watches the 2 other boys run around. And after some time, not long, maybe 10 minutes, the boys kind of move on to another area and he can't see Dennis anywhere. So he thinks that's weird. So he eventually, not breaking eye contact, decides to walk up to the bush and look inside. And there is no Dennis in sight. So immediately he starts looking around, calling his name, nothing. So he jogs to the tree line and like yells Dennis's name, nothing. He's not anywhere to be seen. So he's ex-military, super in shape. He starts sprinting down the path in the woods, calling for Dennis's name. And he runs 2+ miles very quickly. And he sees nothing, no sign of Dennis. And he determines, like, I am further than what he would have been capable of getting to. He's a 6-year-old kid, right? So after he goes far enough to where he's like, there's no way he could get this far, he turns around and sprints back. His grandpa, or his dad, the grandpa, looking everywhere. The boys are looking everywhere. No sign of Dennis. Tells his dad, go to the ranger station and tell them my son is missing. So he goes, and Dennis's dad, Mr. Martin, continues his search. At the same time, 5 miles away, the Key family asks a park ranger, where can we go? Where's the best place we can go in the park to see a bear? Because their son really wants to see a bear. And the park ranger tells the Key family, you should go to Rowan Creek. They're like, okay. So they start on their hike. They get to Rowan Creek. And as they're walking up to the creek, they hear in the distance, quote, the loudest, most sickening scream they had ever heard in their life. And the son kind of thinks it's a bear, so he gets excited. And he points up the hill, and way in the distance along the tree line, he's like, a bear! It's a bear! And his dad's looking at it and says, that's not a bear, because it's walking upright. He said it didn't look like a normal gait or walk, but this creature was very big, rough, shaggy, and in fur. And it's walking along the tree line. And when it notices the Key family, it starts trying to like hide and get behind things. So they determine probably not a good idea to hang out in the area, so they take off. Within the hour, even before the Key family leaves, a massive search starts happening. And ultimately, I think 1,400 people enter the search, including dogs, cadaver dogs, and scent dogs. So the Key family goes home, and the next day they see on the news this young boy is like gone missing and like pretty much vanished into thin air. He looks at a map and sees that he was about 5 miles away. And in the time between the kid went missing and it happened, it was feasible that the kid could have gotten there. And so he calls the National Park Service, he calls the rangers, and he tells them what he witnessed, what his family witnessed, and what happened. And he said, I can come meet you guys right now and show you the exact spot. And they said, no, we'll contact you. And they hung up. So he gets frustrated because he thinks, I think this is important to the case. So he contacts the local paper. Mr. Martin, in the meantime, he stayed at the park for 12 days straight. He didn't go home. He searched everywhere. He even went as far as he went to the bush that he saw his son climb into, and he dug it up. He dug up the ground around it. He tore the bush apart, and his son was nowhere. So 1,400 people come to do like a huge search.
It's massive.
Cadaver dogs who could, even if a body is transported in a car, they can pick up the scent.
It's like, how can 1,400 people not find one kid?
And the dogs find no scent. Eventually, a couple days later, the FBI shows up and they start conducting their own search, separate from the local authorities and the park rangers. After the FBI shows up, a group of Green Berets show up, the Army. They start conducting their own separate investigation. They use their own private channels on all their walkie-talkies. They don't communicate with anyone, and they do all of their investigation at night. So we have local authorities, park rangers, FBI, 1,400 service, and the Green Beret, the Army is there, and none of them are working together. So since then, everyone's wanted to know why Green Beret were involved, so they filed a Freedom of Information Act, which should be honored, and it was just flat out ignored. So they wanted to know who sent them, who called them, what they were doing, and why. Ignored. So, like I said, Mr. Key, he decides to go to the press. He tells them they run this paper that says a large, shaggy man in fur was spotted 5 miles away on the same day that he disappeared. And Mr. Martin finds out about this by reading the paper. So he goes to the park rangers and goes, did you know about this? And they're like, yes. And he's furious. He's like, why didn't you tell me? And they said, it's not important. It's not related. It's too far away. It can't be related. And so he starts at the point where he lost contact with Dennis and walks to the place, Rowan Creek, and he's there in an hour. So it's completely feasible.
Yeah.
14 days later, well, first the FBI stopped their investigation. Green Beret stopped their investigation. And ultimately, 14 days later, the investigation stops. 40 years later, David Paulides knocks on the door of Mr. Martin.
David, what's up? My man.
And he basically says tells him who he is and what he does. And he goes, I want to know about your son. And Mr. Martin and his wife had decided a long time ago that they were going to forget about their son to try and move on and salvage their life. And he goes, tells him who he is once again, and goes, give me 15 minutes. And so Mr. Martin walks out, shuts the door, sits on the porch with him, and just tells him everything. And he says, they are holding some things back They are intentionally like not doing the most to find they're like they hurt the investigation. They held things back. They didn't tell us the full truth. We have no idea what happened.
They, meaning the government.
All these different organizations. So David then finds the reporter that interviewed Mr. Key and asked him what's going on. And he went all over his notes and he told him all the details. And he said, yeah, they claimed that this large, what they could only assume was a man because it was walking on 2 feet, but it was moving unlike any human they've ever seen before. And when they saw it, it was carrying something over its shoulder. Like a small boy-sized object over its shoulder. And David's like, what? Like, this isn't in the paper. And they said, yeah, we didn't print it because we thought no one would believe it.
Just a big game of telephone.
I don't know, dude.
It's crazy how crucial information gets lost.
I'm just going to lay out all the facts and then we can come up with our own thoughts. Jim Reich, he's the FBI investigator in charge of child disappearances in the area. Mr. Martin was in contact with him pretty much every day for like years and years and years until Jim killed himself. So the guy who's in charge of child investigation. Here are the theories. Here are the practical theories first. First, he wandered off. Second, animal predation or an animal attack.
Right.
Third, Mr. Martin was involved. So the dad did something and then lied. All of those were ruled out by all of the people, by like park rangers, by experts. All of those were ruled out. They said if it was an animal attack, they would have found evidence.
Yep.
Even blood. Nothing.
Something. The dogs
Anything.
would have picked up something.
Yeah. The dogs, the 1,400 searchers. He wandered off. Once again, they would have found something.
Dogs.
And then Mr. Martin, he took polygraph tests, everything. They ruled him out. Plus, there was other witnesses there too.
Yeah, they didn't see him do anything with them.
Exactly. So all of those are ruled out by all the official authorities. Leaving, here are the top 3 explanations that aren't conventional. 1, he was taken by a group of feral people. And there's like legends and there are talks of groups of people living in the Appalachian Mountains that are so like wild and removed from reality, like pretty much like cavemen or like hillbilly
I
type.
talked about that once. The moon-eyed people
Ooh, yeah. So
of the Appalachian Mountains.
And like a couple weeks before Dennis went missing, an uncorroborated or like, I don't know if it was fully proven, but a ranger reported being attacked by a wild person.
What?
Yes. 2, and this one's really dark, so skip ahead, trigger warning, but human trafficking. So pedophile rings are a thing. And groups of people looking for kids is a thing. And so it's a theory that one of these organizations was looking for kids specifically like in national parks. So that's theory 2. And theory 3, can you guess? Bigfoot! Some cryptid took him. And the leading theory is Bigfoot.
Honestly, from the beginning of the story, like when you're telling this happening, my thought was man in a ghillie suit kidnapping child.
Whoa.
That's what I thought. Because like if you look at that in the distance, like easily that could be a ghillie suit carrying something over their shoulder. That's what I was leaning towards.
Dude, it very well could be. To this day, they have no idea what happened to Dennis. It's very tragic. It's literally a parent's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And to this day, Mr. Martin claims he never looked away. He never broke eye contact.
So intriguing.
See, but that's where that ghillie suit could come in too. Like, what if he goes over to the bush? He's now freaking out because he doesn't see the kid, but the kid's underneath like some sort of covering. He runs off. They just walk away the other way.
Dude, that would be wild.
So many ifs.
Yeah. I don't know. It's crazy.
That's dark too.
So, what is this? This subject?
missing persons,
411.
411s.
All right. So we've talked about this before, and DJ covered it. So I'm just gonna explain a little bit further for our listeners. This is an entire genre of occurrence known as missing 411. I got shout out to Thomas who sent me that last story. So that last story was by a guy named Bob Gimlin who covered that, and I pretty much just retold his story.
Our Thomas?
Yeah.
Dude, thanks, Thomas.
Shout out.
So our homie Thomas over in Portland. And then so this came from an interview with David Paulides, missing 411 interview.
Would you explain who he is?
From the Can-Am Missing Project. So David Paulides is a former police officer investigator of 20 years in California. And he had worked on high-profile crazy cases. So serial rapists, murders, disappearances. He later became an author through his investigative work, and he covered different topics. But back in the day, he took a trip to Yosemite.
Yeah.
And he was going around Yosemite, and he was accompanied by 2 park rangers. And they were just kind of showing him around, telling him what's up. And they dropped him off, and they said their goodbyes. And he goes to his hotel room. When later that night, he gets a knock on his door, and it's the same 2 park rangers. Mm-hmm. And they're like, Mr. Paulides, we need to talk to you. So he let him in their hotel, and they said, things are happening in national parks, and you should look into it. And between the 2 of them, they tell him all of their experiences. And David Paulides is super intrigued, and he starts looking into it. So the first thing he does is he goes to the national park, Yosemite. It's one of the biggest national parks in America. Well ran. It's a good operation. A ton of national forest workers there, national park workers. And he contacts their team and says, hey, Freedom of Information Act, I would like to look at a list of all missing persons in the national park. And a couple days later, he gets a call from a lawyer. And he says, why do you want that list? And he knows the rules of Freedom of Information Act. You can't determine whether or not you're going to give information to someone based off their intent of how they want to use it.
You just have to give it to them.
Yeah. So then he says, doesn't matter. I need it. And the guy goes, well, we don't have it. And he's like, what? Well, no, you have to have something like this. You guys have a ton of reports. You come out with a report every week. Surely this is something you guys report is missing people in the national park. He's like, if you go to your website, it's full of lists. You guys keep track of everything. And the guy's like, no, we don't have it. So they go back and forth. And then he says, okay, I'm a published author. I'm going to use one of my exemptions to get this information because apparently you can do that. And they get back to him and they say, sorry, you're not in enough libraries or publications, so we can't give it to you.
Admitting that they do have it, but they now have it, but they won't give it.
Kinda. That rule doesn't exist. There is no number where you have to, if you're a published author, you can do that. You can ask for information like that. And then they say, okay, fine. We will, or he says, can't you just hire an intern to every week write down how many people go missing and keep track of that? Or can't you go through all your old files and stuff and give me that information? And they say, sure, we'll give you the list of missing people for Yosemite, but it's going to cost you $34,000. And if you want a list of missing people in all national parks, that will cost you $1.4 million.
What the hell?
And so immediately he's like, what's going on here? Why is there so much pushback for this information? Why is this, it should not be this hard. They should have this information readily available. So since then, that information, you can't access it anywhere. You can't find it. But since then, national parks will put 1 to 2 people missing. That's how many they'll put public. That's it. But they're thousands. So since then, David Paulides and his team have gone through over 5,000 cases of missing people. And they group the special kind of missing cases. So they don't take all missing cases. So their vetting process is if the person had severe mental issues where it was most likely they killed themselves, that's out.
Yeah.
If they can prove that it's animal attack, that's out. If they can prove, or if there's any suspicion in kidnapping, that's out. So what's left is
Just
the cases that are
disappearance.
unexplainable.
Yeah.
There's no explanation. And so he starts going through all of these. He puts them in piles all over his living room, and he starts noticing that he puts them in piles by location, and he starts noticing that all of these locations are just stacking.
Yeah.
So from his investigative days back in the police, he gets a huge map, starts pinning it out, and there are these hot spots of missing people. And it's like dots all over America. You can look it up, and it's just like hundreds of people go missing from the same location. And so he starts looking through, or making, what are the commonalities between these cases? And some of the commonalities are children, super high in common.
Mm-hmm.
So children being a part of it. 2, children's bodies being recovered in very anomalous locations, which is what DJ kind of talked about that one time.
Yeah.
So they find the kid dead, but in a place or location that is simply impossible for him to get to alone. It's near large bodies of water, and a lot of the people who go missing have special needs, like autism or Asperger's, or they have extremely high intellect. So they're like physicists. And after the disappearance happens, weird, unexplainable, bad weather happens in the area. Like in one location, after a kid went missing, 12 days of rain straight. That was like unheard of in this location. And then the last weirdest thing is a lot of them are German. And not only German, but German physicists. Like that's happened enough times where that's a category.
Wow.
I'm just laying out the facts. I'm not drawing any conclusion. And David's very clear that he's like, I'm not saying any of this is a certain thing happening. I'm just saying these are the facts. This is what's happening. So you draw your own conclusion, right? So really quick, I'll just cover two cases. A 2-year-old goes hiking with his parents near Crater Lake National Park in Oregon. He's walking out on a trail right in front of his parents, barely goes out of sight, gone. Can't find him. Completely disappeared. So search dogs, everything, nothing. They rule out, animal attack, all that stuff. 4 years later, they find his body 550 feet up the mountain, up cliffs, where they have to use ropes and skilled climbers to find him. They find his body, no bruises, no blood, no signs of death, pretty much. And they do an autopsy, can't determine the cause of death. And his pants are on inside out. And park rangers say he was killed by a mountain lion.
No. Okay. Up a cliff.
550 feet up a cliff.
I've seen
blood.
I've seen a mountain lion turn pants inside out.
Also, a kind of dark detail of that is they also found one body part of him. They found one single tooth sitting perfectly on top of a log, like 300 feet away.
That's really weird. That's
Another one, a 2-year-old went missing, and they found his body, or 19 hours later, they find his body. He is 12 miles away over 2 mountain ranges and 2 rivers.
He was with his family, disappeared.
Uh-huh.
They find his body how?
Well, like 19 hours later, they just find his body like on the ground or something.
Yeah.
But he's now 12 miles away, and he would have had to have walked over 2 mountain ranges and 2
swim across
rivers.
2 rivers.
Yeah, but how's his body?
I think just lying there dead. Like,
But like, did it look like an animal dragged
no.
it? Or
no, all these cases, animals been ruled out,
So they're just
kidnapping's been ruled out.
dead.
Yeah, they just don't know how. Okay. I don't know. So he's written 6 books. He's put out movies. We should watch it. It's on YouTube.
Missing 411.
Yeah, I want to rent it with you. We'll watch it. He draws no conclusions. And there's a lot of people out there who say, David Paulides says it's like Bigfoot and stuff like that. But according to the interview, I listened to him. He was like, nah, I don't put any of that out there. All I put is the information, and you draw your own conclusions. There are no answers that he can come up with that explain everything. So what he does is he says there is only one case, or in 99% of the cases he's gone through, if they would have had a geolocator or a geotransponder, they probably would still be alive. And he has 0 cases of someone carrying a geotransponder and a firearm of someone going missing. So what he suggests is if you are going to go out into the wilderness, take a geotransponder, something that transmits your, like if you feel like you're, well, this specific one, if you feel like you're in danger, you like press a button and it pings
Your
like,
location.
and then that service contacts the national forest immediately, and they can go straight to your place.
Right.
So he said between $100 and $300 for that.
Worth it.
He suggests carrying a firearm. He's ex-police, so he says he always carries one.
Yeah.
And he never goes out without telling someone where he's going. He takes a map, a compass, and he always checks the weather. So he said if everyone did that, we could probably almost eliminate
99%.
missing people.
What about the 1%?
Good luck.
Dude, that's
So-
pretty creepy.
That is Missing 411. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm just trying to like help our listeners understand what that genre is. People going missing, and there is simply no explanation.
Yeah.
And it's a lot near national parks, places we hold
Near and dear.
near and dear to our hearts. So be careful, as Sean would say.
Yeah.
I'm excited to look more into that. We've known about Missing 411 for a while. I personally haven't looked into it too much because I don't know.
It's heavy.
There's multiple reasons it's hard for me to put it into one, but yeah, it's heavy.
It's
I've
unrewarding
seen
if
a
you
couple.
want. If you want answers, it's very
It's
unrewarding.
frustrating.
Yep.
It's so frustrating because you don't have closure. They don't have closure, and yeah,
it's
a lot
like-
of it's dark and gruesome. And there's a lot of, like you said, thousands and thousands of cases with it. Where do you start?
Yeah.
You just got to pick a place, put your finger down on the map, and
Plus, if you like the outdoors, you're not trying to like
Have that
psych
ruin.
yourself
have
out.
that. Yeah.
That's honestly, he said that's probably the largest reason why his work there's been pushback. It's because people treat nature like their religion, right? It's the place
Right.
they go to unwind or reconnect or reset their mind. And his information is potentially ruining that or affecting it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But
I think it's time we start looking into it more.
yeah, let's go out to the mountains, y'all.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it for me.
Dude, thanks for that introduction, Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah.